continuing the discussion of the previous reporter concerning about the global environmental flaws. In this video, we will be talking about some of the most pressing global environmental issues that not only affects our planet, but also us, especially the generations to come. It is me again, your classmate of Karzanuddin M. Abdullah, second year BS Biology student. Una sa lahat, let us talk about the population growth. While many countries in the global north are experiencing population decline or stability, the global south, especially parts of Asia and Africa, are seeing rapid growth. But it is not just the number of people that actually matters here. What really affects the environment is how much each person consumes. For example, the United States, with about more than 300 millions of people, has a per capita consumption rate that is 32 higher than other countries like Kenya. Ibig sabihin nito, kaunti man ang tao sa isang bansa, pero kung mas malaki sila sa paggamit ng mga resources, mas malaki pa rin ang magiging epekto nito sa ating kalikasan. Countries like China and India have booming population and fast-growing economies. As their consumption rises, the strain on natural resources and the environment increases. Kung magpapatuloy ito, we may reach a tipping point that is hard to reverse.
Another major problem here is the global flow of dangerous debris, especially e-waste. Developed countries like China and the US produces a lot of waste from discarded electronics like cell phones, computers, and TVs. Instead of dealing with their own waste, they often ship it to less developed countries where it is dismantled by poorly paid workers. Masaklap pa rito, these workers are often exposed to toxic chemicals from burning or dismantling gadgets, which can affect their overall health and safety. And worse, leftover waste is most of the time dumped irresponsibly, contaminating the soil and the water.
Now we are moving on to global responses. The good news is that many government agencies and organizations like the United Nations are now promoting sustainable development. This actually means that economic growth that meets present needs, especially of the poor, without compromising the future. This idea became popular during 1992 Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, which helped spread the concept of sustainability across the globe. Pero, despite all of these, challenges still persist, such as predicting ecological outcomes, balancing preservation versus compensation. The disputes over whether population growth or high consumption or production in developed nations is actually the main cause of unsustainability or not. Bumabalik at bumabalik pa rin sa atin ang katanungan whether the globalization is a tool or a threat. Well, globalization can either help or harm, depending on its function. On one hand, it spreads new technologies and encourages environmental awareness. On the other hand, it can promote overconsumption and weaken local regulation. Although the debate still continues over whether economic growth inherently damages the environment or if it can be harnessed for environmental protection. Now, babalik ko sa iyo yung tanong. Para sa iyo, ano ang globalization? Is it a threat or a tool? One of the most urgent issues today is the climate change, mainly caused by fossil fuel emissions. Although there is an overwhelming scientific evidence about its dangers, many governments and corporations, lalo na noon sa US, were hesitant to act. A prime example is the Kyoto Protocol of 1997, which aimed to reduce carbon emissions. Unfortunately, it failed to gain full support, especially from the US, which argued it would harm their economy and unfairly favored developing countries like the China and the India. The good thing is, recently, there has been a positive shift. Even large corporations in the US are calling for stricter climate change policies and more leaders are acknowledging the real threat of global warming. They already set a goal for reducing gasoline use and seeking low emission alternatives.
So, the real issue here is that when we talk about climate change, we often hear about the big plans like carbon taxes or countries aiming to be carbon neutral. But the problem is, these solutions sometimes just look good on paper. What we actually need is a real reduction in carbon emission, not just technical tricks or financial cover ups to make it seems like we're solving the problem. In our global efforts to fight climate change, two major strategies have been introduced: the carbon tax and carbon neutrality. So let us break them down one by one. Carbon tax is a fee imposed on a business based on the amount of carbon dioxide they emit from burning fossil fuels like coal, oil, and natural gas. The idea is very simple actually. The more you emit, the more you pay. This tax encourages companies to reduce their emission by switching to cleaner energy or improving their production process para hindi sila malugi sa buwis. Ideally, global carbon tax would be the most effective, pero kung ilan lang sa mga bansa ang magpapatupad nito, especially kung di kasali sa major polluters like the US or China, the overall impact would be just limited. Still, any participation helps, and it is a step forward in reducing global emission. Now, dumako naman tayo sa carbon neutrality. Noong 2007, nag-anunsyo ang Norway when it announced that by 2050, it would become carbon neutral, meaning its total carbon emission would be net zero. But just a year later, they pushed that target earlier to 2030. Sounds impressive, di ba? However, here's the twist. Much of that neutrality wasn't achieved by lowering emissions within Norway, but by offsetting them, like planting trees or funding pollution cleanups in faraway countries. Parang nilinis lang nila ang sariling kalat pero sa ibang lugar. This process is allowed under UN environmental accounting, but critics argue that it gives a false sense of progress. It is also very expensive, something only wealthy countries like Norway with a lot of oil income can afford. And more importantly, it is not sustainable in the long term. There just aren't enough trees to plant or factories to clean up globally to balance out the carbon emissions of the entire developed world. Again, ano pala yung issue dito? Carbon tax sounds like a smart move, di ba? It makes polluters pay. Pero kung walang malawakang systemic changes sa paraan ng produksyon or sa mismong industries, it won't have a big impact. And carbon neutrality, it's such a nice goal, but if a country says it's carbon neutral just because they planted trees in another country, then we have to ask, are they really solving the problem at home? This is why this issue is deeper than just policies. It is about changing the system and holding countries accountable to make actual, honest progress. Sa huli, the question is still, can we grow globally and economically without compromising our planet? We must find ways to balance progress with protection, to consume more responsibly, and to act globally and think locally. As a young people and future leaders, nasa kamay natin ang mga susunod na hakbang. Whether it is proper recycling, supporting green technologies, and spreading awareness, we all have a role to play. Maraming salamat sa pakikinig, and let us take care of our planet kasi isa lang po ang meron tayo.